She only wanted one night to forget her divorce, but that night would ignite a chain of betrayal, passion, and revenge that could cost her everything. When Diana Vale walked into the lounge that rainy night, she didn't know she was about to meet a man who would shatter her world and force her to choose between love and survival. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, a relentless drumbeat that echoed the hollow ache in Diana Vale's chest. The divorce papers lay sprawled across her mahogany desk, their black and white signatures glinting under the sterile office lights. Once, this office had been her kingdom, the corner suite that was the envy of her peers, the glass trophy that marked her as one of the city's most brilliant marketing minds. Tonight, it felt like a mausoleum. Every polished surface reflected her failure back at her. Every award on the wall mocked her with its silent question: how could you conquer markets and still lose your own marriage? Her phone buzzed again, the name on the screen, Marcus, glowing like a wound that refused to close. She didn't even look at the message this time. She already knew the pattern: guilt-laced apologies followed by justifications, promises she no longer cared to hear. Rebecca's name haunted her thoughts as much as Marcus's. Rebecca, who had stood beside her in a silk bridesmaid's dress 5 years ago, holding her bouquet and her secrets, whispering promises of friendship forever. Now Rebecca had her husband, her trust, and the life Diana had thought was secure. Her pulse thudded in her temples, drowning out the sound of the rain. 3 months had passed since the discovery, and still the betrayal cut as sharply as the first night she saw the text messages on Marcus's phone. She had buried herself in work, taking every late-night assignment, every pitch meeting, every crisis call that crossed her desk. It was easier to be exhausted than to be alone with her thoughts. But even the glow of a new campaign win felt hollow now. The pride she used to feel when signing a major client was gone, replaced by a gnawing emptiness she couldn't fill. The clock on her desk read 8:47 p.m. Most of her colleagues had long gone home, leaving the office eerily quiet, save for the rain tapping its endless rhythm. The thought of her empty apartment, the ghostly quiet, the half-emptied closets, the framed wedding photos she hadn't had the strength to take down, sent a sharp wave of dread through her. She stood abruptly, sweeping the divorce papers into her briefcase as if banishing them from sight could banish the pain. By the time she reached the lobby, the storm had softened to a silvery drizzle. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement as she walked, each step purposeful and sharp, the sound like a metronome to her thoughts. 3 blocks later, the glowing sign of the Crimson Lounge came into view, its red neon humming softly in the rain. It was the kind of place where the lighting was always low, where the leather booths swallowed secrets whole, where a person could sit and disappear into a glass of something strong and amber. Inside, the world was cocooned in dim gold light and the lazy hum of a jazz trio in the corner. The air smelled of oak barrels and old money. Diana shed her coat, her silk blouse clinging slightly to her skin from the damp, and chose a stool at the far end of the bar, a quiet corner where she could observe but not be observed. The bartender, silver-haired and dignified, approached with a sympathetic nod, as if he'd seen 1,000 stories like hers play out under these lights. "Whiskey neat," she said, her voice low but steady. "Make it a double." The glass appeared a moment later, the liquid gleaming like molten bronze. The first sip burned all the way down, and for a fleeting second, the ache in her chest dulled. The second sip was smoother, softer, dangerous. She let her shoulders relax for what felt like the first time in weeks, staring at the way the light fractured through the glass. That was when she heard it, a voice deep and smooth, like velvet stretched over steel. "Rough day at the office?" The words cut clean through the haze in her mind. Slowly she turned, and her gaze collided with a pair of striking green eyes. Eyes that seemed to see far more than they should, eyes that carried their own shadowed weight. The man beside her was tall, broad-shouldered, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as though he'd just run his fingers through it, and there was an ease about the way he held himself, self-assured but not careless, confident but not arrogant. Diana felt her pulse quicken, not with fear but with something sharper, more dangerous. She hadn't planned on conversation tonight. She had planned to drink, forget, and vanish into the shadows. Yet here was this stranger with a voice that seemed to peel away the armor she had so carefully built around herself. She swirled the whiskey in her glass before answering, her lips curving into something that was almost a smile. Something like that. And just like that, the night, and perhaps her entire life, tilted towards something unknown. The man's presence was magnetic, the kind of gravity that bent the room around him. Diana forced herself to look away, but the faintest hint of a smile curved his mouth, as if he had caught her reaction. The bartender appeared again, setting a crystal tumbler in front of him before vanishing back into the low hum of the lounge. Adrien Cross, the stranger said finally, as if it were simply a formality. The name struck her like a jolt of electricity. Everyone in the city knew Adrien Cross, the elusive billionaire who built Cross Industries into a global tech empire and then retreated from public life, granting no interviews, avoiding society events, rarely appearing anywhere that wasn't a boardroom. And here he was, sitting at a bar 3 blocks from her office, speaking to her as if she were the only person in the world who mattered. Diana's first instinct was to retreat. She wasn't sure she had the emotional strength for this kind of man. Powerful, enigmatic, dangerous in the way only people who wanted nothing from you could be. And yet something in his voice, the faint edge of exhaustion beneath the smooth exterior, pulled her in. "Diana Vale," she said finally, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Ah," Adrien murmured, his green eyes glinting with something that looked like recognition. "The Diana Vale. I've heard of you." That startled her. "You have? Your work on the Harrison campaign increased their market share by 40% in 6 months. No one in my world misses numbers like that." He lifted his glass slightly in her direction. Impressive. The compliment hit harder than she expected. For months, she had been defined by her failure as a wife, by whispered pity and awkward silences in hallways. To be seen, really seen, for what she was good at, by a man like this, was almost disorienting. "What brings a man like you here?" she asked, unable to hide her curiosity. Adrien swirled the amber liquid in his glass before answering. "Same thing that brings you here, I imagine. Trying to quiet the noise." Diana looked down at her whiskey, suddenly aware of the irony of sitting here in a silk blouse worth half her paycheck, drinking her pain away like some tragic movie heroine. "Does it work?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," Adrien said, his gaze fixed on her now, intent and unyielding. "But the noise always comes back. The question is, what do you do when the glass is empty?" Something about the way he said it, quiet but challenging, stirred something in her. She had been living in survival mode for months, putting one foot in front of the other, burying herself in work, numbing herself with late nights and empty distractions. What would she do when the glass was empty? She didn't answer. Adrien leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was just for her. "You know what I find fascinating about people like us?" Diana arched a brow. "People like us?" "Successful people," he clarified. "We spend our whole lives running. From pain, from failure, from the fear that we're not as strong as we pretend to be, and we tell ourselves we're running towards something better, but really," his mouth curved into a shadow of a smile, "we're just trying to stay one step ahead of whatever's chasing us." The words landed like a stone in her chest. It was as if he had reached inside her and named the thing she had been too proud to admit, that she was terrified, not just of being alone, but of what being alone said about her. "What are you running from, Mr. Cross?" she asked before she could stop herself. His smile faded, replaced by a shadow that crossed his features, making him look older, more haunted. "The same thing you are," he said quietly. "The fear that maybe we're not as strong as everyone thinks we are." Something shifted between them in that moment, an unspoken recognition, a mirror held up to their respective wounds. The air between them felt charged, as though the entire word had fallen away, leaving only the two of them suspended in this fragile, dangerous honesty. Diana finished her drink, the whiskey warming her all the way down. Her heart was hammering now, not from pain but from something that felt almost like defiance. "I should go," she said finally, though every nerve in her body screamed to stay. Adrien's expression softened. Should and want are two very different things. The way he said it, not pushy, not pleading, just stating a truth, made her throat tighten. "What do you want, Diana?" The question hung between them, heavy, electric. For months she had been running on autopilot, letting her grief make her decisions for her. But here, with this man who seemed to see right through her, she felt something stir that had been dead for too long. "I want—" Her voice faltered, then steadied. "I want to feel alive again." Adrien set his glass down and stood, his hand extended toward her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burning with something that made her pulse race. "Then come with me." The world seemed to narrow to that single moment, her choice. The rain outside had stopped, the city lights reflected in the bar's windows like distant constellations. Slowly, almost against her own will, Diana set her glass aside and placed her hand in his. The contact was electric. They stepped out into the night together, the drizzle cooling her flushed cheeks as Adrien's driver opened the door of a sleek black sedan. Diana slid into the leather interior, heart pounding, knowing that whatever waited for her on the other side of this ride would change everything. Sunlight poured into the room like liquid gold, too bright, too beautiful, too real. For a moment, Diana lay perfectly still, her mind blank, her body cocooned in silk sheets that felt far too soft to belong to her modest apartment. Then memory crashed over her in a rush. The bar, the whiskey, the green-eyed stranger with the voice that stripped her bare, the ride through the rain-slicked streets, the slow electric way he touched her. She sat up slowly, clutching the sheet to her chest, her pulse hammering. The penthouse around her was breathtaking in the light of morning, walls of glass framing a skyline still waking up, furniture so elegant it looked curated for a magazine spread. It should have felt intimidating, alien. Instead, it felt strangely safe, as though she had stepped into a space where the world couldn't reach her. A faint sound drew her attention, the low hiss of an espresso machine, the quiet clink of porcelain. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and found her dress folded neatly on a nearby chair, freshly pressed. Her heart twisted at the gesture. It was considerate, intimate, deliberate. She was fastening the last button when Adrien appeared in the doorway, a vision of controlled elegance. Dark slacks, crisp white shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal forearms dusted with gold from the morning sun. He held 2 mugs, steam curling in the air between them. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice warm but edged with something softer, more careful. Diana accepted the mug, the rich, aromatic coffee filling the air like a promise. "You didn't have to get dressed for me," she said, trying for lightness. His smile was faint, thoughtful. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be here when I came back." She froze for a heartbeat, the words landing with unexpected weight. "I thought about leaving, but you didn't." His tone was unreadable, not a question, not quite relief, more like quiet observation. "I didn't," she admitted, taking a sip. The coffee was perfect, strong and smooth, grounding her in this surreal moment. Adrien sat across from her, watching her with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "Diana, last night wasn't just a moment for me. I want you to know that." Her heart thudded painfully. This was supposed to be simple. Whiskey, a stranger, one night to remind herself she was still alive. Instead, she felt herself drawn to this man in a way that terrified her. "You don't even know me," she said softly. "I know enough." He set his mug down, leaning forward. "I know you're brilliant. I know you've been carrying more than anyone should, and I know you're wasted where you are now." She blinked. "Excuse me?" Adrien's gaze sharpened. "I know what you've done for the Harrison campaign, and for half the clients your firm has landed in the last 2 years. I've read your strategy papers. Hell, I've had your name circled on a list of people I wanted to recruit for months. Last night just convinced me what my instincts already knew. I need you on my team." Diana stared at him, thrown completely off balance. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to stop building other people's dreams and start building your own," he said, his voice low, compelling. "Head of marketing at Cross Industries, triple your current salary, full creative control, and equity, real equity. If we do this right, in 5 years, you won't just be marketing campaigns, you'll be shaping industries." Her heart pounded so hard she could barely hear over it. This was everything she had once secretly fantasized about. The chance to run something, to build something, to be more than just a cog in someone else's machine. And yet, "Are you offering me this because of last night?" The words were out before she could stop them, raw and defensive. Adrien's jaw tightened, but his eyes never wavered. "I'm offering you this because you're the best. The fact that we have, whatever this is." His mouth curved into a shadow of a smile. "That's just a bonus. If you say no, I'll still respect you. But if you say yes..." He leaned in closer, the air between them crackling. "You and I could build something extraordinary together, professionally, and maybe personally, if we're brave enough." Diana's fingers tightened around her mug. This was insane. This was tempting. This was everything she had told herself she wasn't ready for. And yet, for the first time in months, she felt something sharp and alive slice through the numbness that had been her constant companion. "Let me think about it," she whispered. Adrien's expression softened, relief flickering briefly across his face. "Take the day, but don't take too long. I don't make offers twice." He rose, adjusting his cufflinks, already sliding back into the armor of the billionaire CEO. "I'll have my driver take you wherever you need to go." As Diana gathered her things and stepped back into the bright, bustly, young world outside, she realized her life had split in two the moment she took Adrien's hand the night before. The question was no longer whether she could go back, it was whether she wanted to. Across town, in a corner office of Cross Industries, a man with cold gray eyes watched the morning's news briefing with irritation. The headline scrolling across the screen read, Cross Industries eyes bold marketing restructure. Harold Blackwood closed his tablet with a snap. He didn't like surprises, and he especially didn't like unknown variables named Diana Vale. The headquarters of Cross Industries rose like a glass monolith against the morning sky, sleek and gleaming as if it were daring the city to challenge it. Diana stood on the sidewalk for a moment, clutching her portfolio against her chest, staring up at 40 floors of steel and ambition. It wasn't just a building, it was a statement. Adrien had called it their future. Inside, the lobby was cathedral-like, marble floors, cascading greenery, and a vast skylight that flooded the space with golden light. Every surface seemed designed to remind visitors that this was no ordinary company. This was where the future was being built. Her new office was on the 40th floor, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the skyline so breathtaking it made her forget to breathe for a moment. Adrien appeared in the doorway just as she was taking it in, hands in his pockets, an almost boyish grin softening his otherwise commanding presence. "Welcome to your new kingdom," he said. Diana laughed, though her heart raced. "It's incredible. I can't believe this is really happening." "Believe it," Adrien said softly. "You've earned this." For the first time in months, she truly felt like she was standing on the precipice of something new. She threw herself into the role with relentless focus, building a team around her that mirrored her intensity. Within weeks, her campaigns were generating buzz across the industry, drawing attention from competitors and media alike. Cross Industries' social metrics spiked, their brand engagement doubled. Adrien was right. She was no longer building someone else's dream. But not everyone was impressed. It started as whispers, half heard in passing when she walked into a room. Senior managers who glanced at her and quickly looked away. A memo that should have landed on her desk but somehow didn't. Twice, she found discrepancies in reports that she was sure had been flawless when she signed off on them. At first, she blamed herself. Maybe she was pushing too hard, maybe she was missing things. But deep down, a chill was forming in her gut. The first board meeting confirmed her instincts. Harold Blackwood, chief financial officer and Adrien's right hand since the company's inception, sat across from her with the kind of calm that felt like a trap. His steel-gray eyes never left her as she presented her latest campaign, a bold, aggressive move designed to position Cross Industries as a leader in the sustainable tech market. "These projections seem overly optimistic," Harold said coolly when she finished. His tone was polite, but the words carried the faint sting of condescension. "Perhaps our new marketing director needs more time to understand how we operate here." Diana straightened in her chair, pulse quickening. "The projections are based on solid market research and proven strategies," she said evenly. "I've included detailed analysis in the appendix that supports every recommendation." Harold's expression didn't change, but his gaze flicked toward Adrien like a silent dare. "Diana's track record speaks for itself," Adrien said, his voice carrying a quiet edge. "Her campaigns have already exceeded expectations. Let's give her room to execute." The meeting moved on, but Diana felt Harold's stare lingering on her like a shadow. That night, she found Adrien in his office, the city lights spilling across the floor like molten gold. "What is his problem with me?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Adrien's jaw tightened. "Harold has been with me since the beginning. Sometimes he forgets that this company has outgrown the days when it was just the two of us in a rented warehouse." "This isn't about nostalgia," Diana said quietly. "He doesn't respect me. He thinks I'm here because of you." Adrien stood and came around the desk, his presence as steadying as ever. "You are here because you're brilliant. Don't let Harold make you question that. I'll handle him." But Harold didn't back down. If anything, his hostility sharpened. Over the next few weeks, Diana's inbox became a war zone. Urgent memos went missing, meetings that should have included her happened without her knowledge, and key data in her campaign reports began to show inexplicable errors, the kind that could make her look incompetent. Then came the night that shattered any illusion that this was just corporate friction. Jessica, her young and fiercely loyal assistant, stayed late one evening to finish prepping for a client presentation. When Diana arrived the next morning, Jessica pulled her aside, her face pale. "Ms. Vale," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "I think you should know. I saw Mr. Blackwood in your office last night, well past midnight. He was in there for almost an hour." Diana's stomach dropped. "Doing what?" Jessica shook her head. I don't know, but he left with a folder from your desk. The chill that had been coiled in Diana's gut spread through her veins like ice water. This wasn't office politics anymore. This was war, and Harold Blackwood was playing for keeps. That evening, Diana stood at the window of her apartment, staring down at the glittering city below, her mind a storm. Adrien had told her to trust him, but every day Harold's power moves grew bolder. If he was willing to break into her office, what else was he willing to do? She grabbed her phone, thumb hovering over Adrien's contact. If she called him now, would he listen? Or would Harold get to him first, twisting the truth, spinning his web tighter around the man who had built this empire with him? Her reflection in the glass looked almost like a stranger, a woman with sharp eyes and squared shoulders, no longer content to simply survive. No more running, Diana whispered to her reflection. Not this time. Outside, thunder rumbled low over the skyline as if the storm was just beginning. The next morning began like any other, but the dread in Diana's chest was a warning she couldn't name. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt unusually long, each floor ding echoing in her skull like a countdown. When the doors slid open, she knew immediately something was wrong. 2 security guards were standing by her desk, their hands clasped in front of them, faces expressionless. And in her office, stood Harold Blackwood, flanked by 2 members of HR. His mouth was curved in a polite, razor-sharp smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Vale, one of the guards said, his voice neutral but firm. Please gather your personal belongings. You're being terminated effective immediately. For a moment, Diana thought she had misheard him. Excuse me? On whose authority? Mine, Harold said smoothly, stepping forward and holding a slim black folder as if it were a death warrant. We've conducted an internal investigation. We've discovered that you've been sharing confidential company information with Morrison Tech, one of our primary competitors. The room tilted. That's impossible, Diana said, her voice icy and sharp enough to slice the air. I would never do such a thing. Harold spread the documents across her desk like a magician revealing his trick. The evidence suggests otherwise. Here are the emails you sent from your company account. The timestamps align perfectly with security footage of you working late those nights. Diana stared at the papers, horror blooming in her chest. The emails looked authentic. Her writing style, her signature, her company address. But she had never written them. Not one word. These are fabricated, she said, her voice low but unwavering. Someone has set me up. Harold's eyes glittered, cold and triumphant. Security footage doesn't lie, Ms. Vale. Neither does metadata. Mr. Cross has been informed and agrees that your immediate termination is necessary to protect the company's interests. Adrien. The name slammed into her like a blow. He had been her one anchor in this world, the man who told her he believed in her brilliance, who promised to handle Harold, and now he had sided with him. I want to speak with Adrien, she said, forcing steel into her voice. He's in Singapore on business, Harold replied smoothly, though something about the satisfaction in his tone made her want to put her fist through the glass wall behind him. Your access to all company communications has already been revoked. The guard stepped closer. We'll escort you out. Diana gathered her few personal items, a photo of her parents, a pen she'd been gifted when she closed her first major account, the coffee mug Jessica had given her on her first day. Each item felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The office, her team, her future, all of it dissolved in an instant. As she walked through the open floor, her colleagues watched in uncomfortable silence. Some avoided her gaze, others stared with barely hidden pity. It felt like a public execution. By the time she stepped into the elevator, Diana's face was burning, her spine stiff with fury. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But when the elevator doors closed, sealing her in a mirrored box, the first hot tear broke free. For 3 days, Diana didn't leave her apartment. Her phone sat on the coffee table, a graveyard of unanswered calls she had made to Adrien, calls that went straight to voicemail. She tried his assistant, his direct line, even the main switchboard. Nothing. It was as if she had been erased. By the 4th day, she forced herself to shower, pull on a blazer, and sit down at a coffee shop with her laptop. If her career was going to burn, she would sift through the ashes herself. But each rejection email hit like a slap. Word had already spread. The industry believed the scandal. She had gone from rising star to pariah overnight. Diana Vale? The voice pulled her from the screen. A woman had slid into the seat across from her, auburn hair tucked neatly behind her ears, eyes sharp with intelligence. I'm sorry. Do I know you? No, the woman said, setting a sleek leather messenger bag on the table. But I know what happened to you, and I think you're in serious trouble. Diana's first instinct was to shut her laptop and walk away. I'm not interested in talking to reporters. The woman smiled faintly. My name is Vanessa Chen, investigative journalist with the Financial Tribune, and I think you've been set up. In fact, I think this isn't the first time Harold Blackwood has done this to someone who threatened his position. Diana froze. Vanessa pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. Thomas Green, former head of product development. Ent. Accused of stealing patents, fired. Sarah Kim, CTO, accused of embezzling RD funds, fired. James Morrison, yes, that Morrison, accused of taking bribes from suppliers. All 3 careers destroyed. All 3 stories traced back to evidence Harold Blackwood personally presented to Adrien Cross. Diana scrolled through the articles, her pulse pounding in her ears. Each case had the same pattern. Impeccable records, damning evidence, a swift and final termination. You're telling me this is a pattern? I'm telling you Harold Blackwood is running this company from the shadows, Vanessa said, her voice low but urgent. And Adrien Cross, for all his brilliance, is either too loyal or too scared to stop him. Diana leaned back, her mind spinning. Why are you telling me this? Because you might be the first person who can fight back. You still have allies inside the company. People who believe you're innocent. If we gather enough proof, we can bring him down. Diana stared at her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop, the face of a woman who had been broken too many times, who had nearly let herself stay on the ground. No, she said finally, her voice low but steely. We don't just bring him down. We clear my name. We burn every lie he ever told to the ground. Vanessa's mouth curved into the faintest smile. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. For the first time since she had been dragged out of Cross Industries in front of everyone, Diana felt a spark ignite in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but something stronger, determination. The war Harold Blackwood had started was about to get very, very personal. Friday night bled into the city like ink spreading across glass. The Cross Industries building loomed against the skyline, 40 floors of steel and light, the very place that had once felt like Diana's sanctuary and had now become her execution ground. She moved through the marble lobby like a shadow, Jessica's stolen keycard slick with sweat in her palm. Every step echoed too loudly, every security camera felt like an accusing eye. But she couldn't stop now. Weeks of digging through records with Vanessa had led her here, to the one person who needed to see the truth with his own eyes. Adrien's office was dark, save for the faint glow of the city pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He sat at his desk, head in his hands, looking nothing like the untouchable billionaire the magazines worshipped. When Diana stepped into the doorway, he flinched at the sound of her heels. "Hello, Adrien," she said, her voice steady even though her heart was trying to punch its way out of her chest. He looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes almost broke her. "How did you get in here?" "I still have friends in this building," she said simply. "Friends who believe in the truth." Adrien stood slowly, like a man shouldering invisible chains. "Diana, I don't know what to believe anymore. Harold showed me everything. The emails, the timestamps, the footage. It all pointed to you. But my heart keeps telling me it's impossible." "Your heart is right," she said, stepping forward until the city's glow caught the hard line of her jaw. She dropped the thick folder of documents onto his desk. "This proves every piece of evidence against me was fabricated. Harold Blackwood has been using this company as his personal chessboard for years. I wasn't the first person he destroyed, just the one he couldn't silence." Adrien's hands trembled as he flipped through the files. Email logs showing Harold's after-hours access to her account, security footage with tampered timestamps, whistleblower testimony from IT. His jaw clenched tighter with every page. "My God," he whispered. "What have I done?" "You trusted the wrong man," Diana said, softer now, her anger tempered by the pain in his face. "You let him use your loyalty against you." Adrien looked up, his eyes shining with something raw and unguarded. "I should have fought for you. I should have trusted you over anyone else. Can you ever forgive me?" Instead of answering, Diana walked around the desk, taking his face between her hands. "I didn't fall in love with Cross Industries, Adrien. I fell in love with the man who built it, the man who made me believe I could feel alive again." The distance between them shattered. Their kiss was not gentle. It was desperate, full of all the months they had been kept apart, all the fury, all the longing. When they finally broke apart, Adrien's voice was steel. "Tomorrow morning, Harold Blackwood is finished." The emergency board meeting was called for 9 a.m. sharp. The room was full. Directors, legal counsel, even a few shareholders who had flown in overnight. At the head of the table stood Adrien, his expression carved from granite. Diana sat beside him, no longer the humiliated employee being dragged out by security, but the accuser ready to reclaim her name. Harold strolled in as though he owned the building, his silver hair gleaming, his smirk firmly in place. "Adrien," he said smoothly, sliding into his seat, "I assume this is about the Morrison tech breach. I can assure you—" "Save it," Adrien said coldly. "We're past excuses." One by one, Adrien laid out the evidence Diana and Vanessa had compiled, projected on the massive screen for everyone to see. Audit logs, falsified reports, witness statements. With each revelation, Harold's confidence cracked until the sweat stood out on his temple. "This is a lie," Harold spat finally, his composure unraveling. "You have no idea the things I've kept buried for you, Adrien. The deals I helped cover up, the shortcuts we took to build this empire. You think you can just cut me out and stay clean?" The room went still. Adrien's jaw tightened, and then, to everyone's shock, he nodded. "You're right," Adrien said, his voice calm but unyielding. "We did take shortcuts, and I let you convince me it was the only way to survive. But I'm not that man anymore. I would rather burn this company to the ground than let you blackmail me one more day." The silence was deafening. "You're finished, Harold," Adrien said, his voice ablade. "Effective immediately, you are removed from your position. Legal is already moving forward with criminal charges for fraud, evidence tampering, and corporate espionage." Two security officers stepped into the room. For the first time, Harold's composure cracked completely. His face flushed, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was escorted out, his empire of manipulation collapsing behind him. When the doors closed, Adrien turned to the board. "I owe this company the truth, and I owe this woman my public apology." Every pair of eyes turned to Diana as Adrien told them everything. Not just about Harold's deception, but about his own failures, his fear, his near loss of the woman he loved. And when he was done, the board voted unanimously to reinstate Diana, not just to her old position, but as Senior Vice President of Global Marketing. Weeks later, Diana stood once more in Adrien's penthouse, but now it felt different. It felt like home. Adrien crossed the room, holding a small velvet box. His hands, the same hands that had once built a company from nothing, trembled just slightly as he knelt before her. "Diana Vale," he said, his voice low but sure. "You saved my company, my future, and my faith in love. Will you marry me?" Her breath caught, tears burning her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Months later, under a sky full of lights and music, Diana danced in Adrien's arms at their wedding. The company was thriving, her reputation restored, her team stronger than ever. But none of it compared to this, the quiet, steady beat of Adrien's heart under her cheek, the way his hand rested protectively over the slight curve of her stomach. "You showed me that the best beginnings come from the worst endings," she murmured. Adrien smiled, pulling her closer as the world spun around them. "Here's to new beginnings, Mrs. Cross." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Diana knew the storm had finally passed, and she was exactly where she was meant to be.